Welcome to the Derby Difference, the official podcast of Derby Academy in Hingham, Massachusetts, where we celebrate the people, the stories, and the spirit that make our pre-K through grade 8 community so special. I'm your host, Jeff Natale, and today I'm excited to be joined by our 7th grade U.S. history teacher, Mr. Tom Graziano, who not only brings the past to life in our classroom, but he also happens to be a proud Harvard alum, a diehard Red Sox fan, and the co-creator of one of Derby's most electric electives, the history of baseball, with yours truly. And with that, welcome, Mr. Tom Graziano. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here, buddy. What an intro.
You're the first teacher. So how does it feel to be right out of the chute, first teacher to go on the podcast?
It's an honor, truly. I mean, I'm just forever blown away by my colleagues' commitment to their jobs, commitment to our kids. So it's a special thing to be the first teacher guest, truly.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
You deserve it.
Thank you.
So what drew you to teaching U.S. history, and what drew you to middle school and maybe Derby Academy?
Yeah, I think to the U.S. history part, I've just always been a huge history guy. I mean, just straight up, it's the class I remember thinking 4th and 5th grade, give me that textbook. I really was the guy that just had that hunger to go chapters and chapters ahead. I think growing up in Boston was a big part of it. Growing up right in the city, the history's all around us. It's just inescapable. I don't know how you can be socialized in Boston and not grow that love of history. For the middle school piece in particular, my grade 7 year was one of immense transition. My twin sister and I went from a small Catholic school in Dorchester to Boston Latin School, 2,400 kids, 6 different grades. And it was a bit of a bumpy landing. I think I did well academically, but the expectations were so ratcheted up. And I try to bring both things I would have think I wanted, the rigor of BLS, the rigor of Boston Latin School, but also maybe a little more operating empathy than I received, I think, from some of those teachers
Sure.
25 years ago. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what about Derby Academy? What brought you to Derby? How did you find us? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I hadn't heard of Derby before I heard about the job posting. I was mid-search for the first gig, right? I'd gotten my master's at UMass Boston, and it was a full court press to find that first job. I feel like we really took a chance on each other. Derby had posted, I believe it was on School Spring, and I was really blown away. I was hired initially as an 8th grade teacher. I was blown away by the language of our 8th grade history class description in the job posting, really talking about becoming a global citizen in an ever more interconnected world. That language was in my stock cover letter. Yeah. This wasn't a case of tailoring it to what you think they're looking for. Those were my values, really. I really do think history positions as well to not only be better American citizens, but a truly global citizen, a global perspective. So, and then just falling in love with the campus. You hear it time and again. I heard Colleen, Dr. Ramsden in her episode talk about it. That sense of, wow, what a campus, what a learning environment, what a community. That really shone through in the entire interview process. And the team, which is now entirely turned over, was so welcoming. But I really believe it's no less welcoming today. I hope and trust that the folks that are really considering Derby today as an employer have that same experience. And I know they do from what I've heard.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of teaching history at Derby?
I love teaching history at Derby. Not only does Derby give you the curricular autonomy in the classroom, really kind of getting to sink your teeth in as a teacher to topics and approaches that suit you and the kids. You get that autonomy, but also Derby values its own history. Right? Really, Derby absolutely leans at every possible point, as I see it, into embracing and celebrating its own unique history as a co-ed school from its inception. So I just really cherish our history and love to be part of this community.
Yeah, it's an amazing place when you think about it, to be the first co-ed or one of the first co-ed schools. Right. Sarah Derby had that vision of boys and girls going to school together.
Totally.
It is incredible when you hear the stories either from Dr. Ramsden at First Chapel or throughout the year. I love the 3rd grade, or I think it's the 2nd grade in the lower school, does the history of Derby and they talk about Derby. And I just remember my daughter from last year coming home with all these stories that I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So I love that Derby sort of leans into that and makes its history known, right? I think it's such an incredible thing as a school.
It is.
To be around since 1784. We should be celebrating.
We are older than the Constitution. We are older than our frame of government as a school, which is really cool. Really cool. Think about it. Brand new country, finding its legs. Here's a unique educational model trying to find its way too, this co-ed approach that was unique. I mean, essentially, unique at the time. For New England.
How do you make history come alive for students? How do you make something that happened in 1784 feel relevant and feel exciting for these kids?
I hope I do.
You do. I've heard.
Thank you. It means a lot. I know you talked to our 8th grade, I know you're on the pulse here. I think it's by turning them into historians. I think you've got to do history to really not only learn it, but also love it. And by that, I mean, getting kids to roll up their sleeves and play in the sandbox, as I call it, primary source work, really looking at the voices and perspectives of folks at the time in creating historical analysis or making an argument. If you're not doing that, it can feel a little static. I think there's a time and a place for textbook chapters. I use them. I like them as ways to eat up a lot of ground quickly, catch us up on background. But then I think you got to have that value add of, where's the historian's work coming in? And I think that's what really, I think once our kids feel empowered and confident in it, then they're off to the races. They truly just take it from there and tend to grow that love of history. I think that's the thing I'm proudest of, is how many kids often say, I didn't love history before your class, but I do now. So that's the win.
I hear that quite often when our 7th graders, you teach 7th grade, when they become 8th graders, it's always, I was kind of so-so on history. It was okay. And then I had Mr. G's class, and now all of a sudden I love it. And I'm excited for Mr. Hulk's class in the 8th grade.
Yeah, that means a lot. That means a lot. It's the best, right? I mean, that's what you do it for. I mean, truly, to try to foster that love. I always say the kid that comes in loving history, we can grow that, and that's a win too in its own way. But the converts, I call them. The converts are the sweet spot.
Absolutely. So let's really get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast.
Sure.
The history of baseball.
Yeah, exactly.
Most electric, the best goal class that Derby has to offer. How did you come up with the idea? What was the inception like of that?
I think it'd be bad history to say I came up with it, because we came up with it. There was a first person plural, right? I mean, we came up with it. I think it was that water cooler moment. They always talk about that free time, which is so limited. Our jobs are busy. But I remember you and I talking about, hey, our shared love of baseball be a goals group. And I think Derby, as I said before, gives you that autonomy, not only in your classroom for your core classes, but to create a goals group, right? The Get Out and Learn Something program. I also do Model UN, which is wonderful and existed before I got here and hopefully will exist long after me. But the fact is, you can also make up something. If you want to do model rockets, if you want to do a scene study, if you want to do a writer's workshop, we settled on, hey, how can we take our kids on a journey of intertwining the history of our country and the history of baseball, the best sport, obviously. And it was off to the races. I mean, we then had a hardcore group of guys, and it was all guys. I'd love to see that change, but it is, it's a self-selecting group. And the fact is, they were all along for that ride. They really, really took it seriously from jump. And, we go week by week and look at a given year. We randomize it, right? It's the third strike, I believe. The first two don't count. And then we say, hey, next year we're looking at 1918, we're looking at 1977, we're looking at 2003. What's going on in American history at that time, or even world history, and what's going on in the sport?
Do you have a favorite moment from that class? Was there any sort of aha moment or any sort of moment that has stuck out to you about the class?
I think there's a moment that gets at my ethic in the history classroom, which is you don't lead people to a conclusion. And by that, I mean the moment we got lucky here, because Major League Baseball had, in the same week we were about to meet, had just opened up the record books to Negro League records, right? They had just said these records, because of the discrimination those players were facing, we're not in good conscience going to exclude their achievements, their stats from the overall Major League Baseball records. I thought coming into that class that was the right call, 100% for moral and just, practical reasons. Those guys were excluded. They were incredible players, but for that racial barrier, they would have been all over the leaderboards, period. Just no doubt, your Josh Gibsons, your Pages, etc. But I didn't want to come in and bonk guys over the head with that. Right. That's not the job of a history teacher, to indoctrinate, right? I was proud of our guys for doing that moral reasoning in the moment, right? I think you remember we maybe had one initial holdout, but I think even by the end, his classmates, not us, but his classmates had kind of swayed him to, hey, for all those reasons, these records should be considered part of the larger sweep of Major League history and stats. And I thought that was a really cool moment, really sort of illustrated the fact that when kids have the facts before them, you don't need to brainwash or indoctrinate or lead a horse to water in a sense. They can do the moral reasoning themselves and say, hey, what's right is right.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite parts of that class is a lot of times we just introduce a topic.
Yeah.
It might be Negro League, record-breaking stats. Do they count or not? Or is steroids good for baseball or bad for baseball?
Right.
Should those guys be in the Hall of Fame? And I love the fact that our kids are able to sit around tables, look at each other, have great conversations, push each other towards the truth, push each other away from the truth, and have really good conversations. And we, as teachers, sometimes just sit back and let the conversation happen. And we can jump in, but for the most part, we want those kids to be pushing each other. And for us, it's just kind of like lobbing the softball up and letting them take a big swing. They might swing and miss.
Yeah.
And that's why we're there. But they also might hit it out of the park.
No doubt. And I think, this is the umpire role, right? I try to be the umpire in any kind of class discussion, not necessarily put my finger on the scale. And I think you do a great job with really getting kids to back up their argument. I think you do a great job fostering that habit of mind. What's your evidence?
Yeah.
I think sometimes, especially talking about sports, we know this age group can sometimes go, this is not baseball, but LeBron James is so much better than Jordan. Duh, obviously. Why?
Yeah.
Make the case. You do a great job instilling that, make the case.
Yeah.
I think that's transferable too. Growing that muscle, that does travel.
Absolutely. How do you think we use baseball to teach broader lessons in American history and culture?
Yeah, I think they're everywhere, right? I really do believe that at any given moment in American history, the game kind of reflects the state of the country. I really do. Whether it's the clothes people are wearing to games, whether it's the state of technology, whether it's the state of race relations and civil rights. I think that comes across pretty clearly, whether it's the game stopping altogether as life seemed to after 9/11, there's so many different moments where you can just sort of hit pause and say, wow, in some ways that mirrors, the larger sweep of the country and where things were. It's hard to even think of specific examples because in my view, that's one of the beautiful parts of baseball is you can really, you can overlay it on American history and there's just so many synergies and
absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about you as a Boston Red Sox fan. So that's what what all of our fans are here to hear. They want to talk about Boston Red Sox baseball.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your sort of initial fandom in the Boston Red Sox. Tell me about maybe your first Red Sox memory.
Sure. First game was 96. I think it was Roger Clemens' last game as a Red. It was an intense game. The first time you go into Fenway, truly locked in as a fan in 1998, I would say. Nomar Garcia Parra, Pedro, like every kid in New England, I did the batting gloves, obsessive compulsive disorder thing. I fell in love in 98 and it's been off to the races ever since. Shout out to my mom for subscribing to Nesson. I remember that, I remember the same day that, she made a call and all of a sudden we had it over cable and that was amazing. In 2004, I actually became a groundskeeper there. A buddy of mine at Boston Land School had gotten a job through a Boston Public Schools career office, career training office. And he hooked me up that summer. I get the call saying, hey, would you be interested in joining me at Fenway? I was like, I'm dropping the phone, So did that for a couple of years. That was incredible. I'll never forget the first day I showed up and Pedro Martinez walked by me in the outfield. I was holding a hose and Pedro just walks by. He was starting that night. So that was wild. You never forget that's just indelible. Just to have that experience, I think truly cemented the fandom of just being a Fenway insider for a couple of years. Yeah. I could tell some stories, but I don't know how some are more podcast appropriate than others. But...
Totally. If you want to hear more, grab a beer with Mr. G.
Exactly.
Tell me about your favorite Red Sox player all time and then your current favorite Red Sox player.
Yeah. All time is Tim Wakefield. All time is Tim Wakefield, not only being an absolute phenomenal pitcher when he was on his game, 200 win guy, but also embodying the Derby values, resilience, character, looking out for those in need. Here was a guy that just relentlessly showed up for sick kids. And then, of course, sadly, tragically passed away himself all too soon from cancer. But absolutely an inspiration. Number 49 is my guy all time. I'd say favorite Red Sox player today, Crochet. Easy after last night, but I'm looking forward to seeing him play for years and years. What a gamer, what a stud pitcher.
If you can go back in time to watch one baseball game, you can insert yourself in the crowd for one game. What game are you choosing and why?
The first one. The first one ever. Yeah, and then that's my history teacher answer, but also my sincere one. I'd love to see what it's maybe hard to pinpoint exactly when baseball becomes baseball because there's earlier bat and ball games, but I'd love to see the first one just to see, hey, what was that like? We're not even sure where it was. Some people say Cooperstown, but that seems kind of mythological. I'd love to just be a spectator, out in the tall grass, just kind of taking in the first game, whenever that was. That'd be cool.
They say it's at Doubleday Field at Cooperstown.
Abner Doubleday, right? Civil War general. But I've also heard that might just be, apocryphal. I don't know, but if it's there, it's there wherever it was. I'd love to check it out.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah.
How did your time at Harvard shape your approach to teaching and learning?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I was just struck by the absolute passion for the subject material of every professor there. I think that radiated through, and I try to bring that, really try to bring that every day. It is showbiz. I always say teaching is show business. And I think Above all, though, it was, for me, that transformative moment of try on some new stuff. I think I really had locked in, no surprise, but had really kind of tracked myself in history by the end of BLS. At Harvard, it became a little more take a chance on a class about modern Jewish literature, or feeding the world, feeding yourself, a class about nutrition and agriculture, and just take some big swings, right? Take some, a class on cinema, a class on so-called sound cinema that really then vaulted me. I always loved movies, but really then vaulted me into seriously appreciating movies on a deeper level. I think it gave me that chance to try on, and I hope kids, I know Derby gives that same opportunity. I see it every year, kids really taking a chance on something and just boom, totally different life course as a result. It's cool.
Yeah. And we see that in our history of baseball class too.
Yeah.
Although it is all boys, we have a lot of, it's not just baseball players,
It's true.
right? We have
It's
lacrosse
true.
players in there. We've got track students that are in there. Well, I appreciate about, about the history of baseball.
100%. Yeah.
If you could bring one professor from your Harvard experience to Derby to teach a class, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I think the guy for me that comes right to mind is Professor Jens Mayer-Henrich. He's since moved on from Harvard, but he was my thesis advisor. I ended up taking 2 classes with him, a scholar of genocide and international law. I would love him to come sit in on my Rwanda unit. We do teach a history of the Rwandan genocide unit, really asking, how can we account for this horror, right? This 1994 catastrophe that visited that small African nation, where a huge percentage of the population rose up at the government's urging and really attacked their neighbors, right? It's a devastating bit of history. I think we do every bit we can to tailor it for this age group. We're not dwelling in the horrors of 1994.
Sure.
We're asking why. How can you explain something like this? I'd love for him. He was the one that really vaulted my own study of genocide and such issues into another level, I would say. And I'd love for him to sit in on that in particular. Give me some feedback.
What do you hope students carry with them after leaving your history classroom?
I hope they carry with them a sense of, first of all, how similar we are to the folks in the past. How our basic motivations, I think in studying primary sources, texts from the time, I think that comes right through. So we're not different than a person from the year 1000 BC or 1800 CE or anything. The other thing, so that essential humanity, I hope comes through, that living past. But I also hope kids can retain the frame on history that we're not here to judge. We all had that reflex of, my God, this is horrible. But we have to transcend that. I think that was one thing this professor I just talked about always used to talk about. Let's go beyond what he called morality tales, because that's not the historian's job, right? We all are entitled to our reflexes of, this is outrageous. Why would you ever do this? But let's go beyond that as much as possible, right? Hold space for that, of course, right? But let's go beyond that and really get into the why. We're not excusing, we're explaining. I always say that. We're not, to excuse is not the same thing as to explain.
Got it. And from your perspective as a teacher, what makes the Derby experience unique? Like, what are these kids getting that maybe other students aren't getting? And you can kind of talk about it from the lens of your history class.
Yeah, I think it's that relentless approach of, and I hear this a lot from parents. I hear a lot about the writing, really having prepared. One of the beautiful things about being here 7 years now, I've got a lot of younger siblings coming, and I hear the feedback on the fly from parents of those older siblings I also taught. I don't want to say brag, but my feeling, my point of pride. No,
Yes.
My brag. I'll be honest. My brag is that I think our kids leave well equipped for the demands of what a history class has to be today. In an era when you can Google any given fact, the real value add, the juice of history is learning to think critically, learning to argue with evidence, to write. ChatGPT it's not the same. You don't get anything out of asking AI to do it for you. AI, it's not even a crutch. It's doing the work for you. It's a motorized scooter or something, right? It's not a crutch. It's more than. We need to have kids thinking on their own, growing their own intellectual capacities. And I think our history program does that in the upper school. I really believe that.
I would agree with that. The high school young alumni, the 9th graders, the 10th graders, the 11th graders that I talk to, they are so well prepared. They're ready to go for their history classes and their English classes.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with you, Mr. Hulk, Mr. Andrioli, Aileen Nalen, Ali Moore, Stephanie O'Brien, all the humanities folks. I hope I didn't leave anybody out.
No,
but I think I got everybody. But our humanities teachers do such a good job of, like you mentioned, kind of getting to that second level where it's not just ChatGPT and edit a few things out and then we move along. We really want our students to go through the writing process, and it's not always clean. it's messy a lot of
Yep.
times. And then the redraft and the editing and all the hard work that goes into
Yep.
it after that. I think Derby does a great job with that.
And understanding too that it's never going to be perfect. I always say to kids, you know, we just did a 7th grade document-based question or DBQ paper. I always lead off that year by saying, I don't know what perfect writing looks like. You know what I mean? I know what great writing looks like, but forget perfect. You know, that's one of the beautiful things about writing is there's not some absolute, archetype, dream piece that's going to just, there's always stuff you can tweak. You can, just like in teaching, you know, you don't teach the same class, even in a given day. If I see the same 3 sections, it's never the same. You know, you can always go back and tweak a paper. It's never done if you don't want it to be, but at some point you have to hit turn it in Google Classroom.
Sure.
But I think I would leave kids with that too. That sense of like, if you can look yourself in the mirror and know you did your best on it, let the chips fall where they may at that point. You get the grade you get, but and you want to learn and grow, obviously, right? You want to improve, but you know, you have to be able to say, hey, I've done my best and this is what it is. Yeah.
You clearly didn't read my blog. That thing was money.
I'm getting there, Jeff. It's on the docket.
So let's do a little fun and quick rapid fire,
Sure.
and then we'll end with my signature question.
Sure.
Would you rather spend a day at Fenway Park or Cooperstown?
Cooperstown. I've never been. It's a confession. Never been.
My goodness.
I know.
We got to get you there.
I do.
Amazing experience. I played a game there. I don't know.
Oh,
if
nice.
you know.
Nice.
At the Doubleday Field.
Cool.
When I was with Pawtucket.
It's amazing.
Incredible experience. And we got to walk around the, Cooperstown and see like all the different baseball players from history that are celebrated there. Just an incredible experience.
I gotta go. It's ridiculous. I've got to go.
Best ballpark other than Fenway?
Camden Yards in Baltimore.
Beautiful park. Beautiful. Hot dogs or peanuts?
Hot dog all day.
World Series game or opening day?
They're both going to be really cold if it's Fenway. So let's say World Series because the stakes are just higher and I've never been to a World Series game.
It's starting to get a little cooler.
It is.
When I woke up this morning, It's October. October baseball in full effect.
It's the best.
Predictions, because this podcast will probably come out after the World Series.
Yep.
So we're going to look back on this and say, you're either the smartest guy ever or how could you claim you're a baseball expert?
Red Sox over Phillies in 6.
All right.
Sox over Phillies in 6.
By the time this comes out, this might be the 2026 season, but we'll roll with it. It's for the 2025 season, just to make sure. One historical figure you'd like to bring to a Red Sox game. Could be anybody.
Yeah, I'd love to go with Ben Franklin. You know, he's funny, just so witty, and he's also a Boston guy too. You know, I'd want him to get a feel for how's my hometown changed, and I think he'd have fun watching this newfangled sport of baseball.
Love it. Favorite president?
Abe Lincoln, just hands down. Number 16, big number 16. You know, we talked earlier in the year about Doris Kearns Goodwin. I did listen to that the Stoicism podcast with her as a guest, and I think she hits on all the stuff I've always loved about Lincoln. You know, just that relentless moral grounding, right? The willingness, sheer brilliance of the guy, but also the willingness to admit when he didn't know something and when he needed help and solicit the advice and help of others and to make the hard decision, ultimately all leading up to making a series of incredibly hard decisions to do what he knew was right. Keep the country together, end the brutal and outrageous practice of slavery in our country.
And what I've learned from you is that Abe Lincoln was a giant failure, right? He failed so many times leading up to being, the most successful or one of the most successful presidents ever.
Totally.
There were these speed bumps all along the way. It wasn't like he was, a shoo-in president. It wasn't like he went through high school and, this was like his path.
No.
He failed so many times.
Yeah.
And in my leadership and training course, he's actually one of the leaders that I talk about. Like when you fail once, who cares, right? You fail twice, who cares? Like look at all these historical figures. Right. And he's one of the ones that I highlight as, failing a million times before becoming arguably the most successful president ever.
If you're never failing, you're not taking big enough swings. I mean, if you're never failing, you're not taking big enough swings. I always tell our Derby Student Council runners up, look at Lincoln, loses to Stephen Douglas in 1858 in the Illinois Senate race, then beats him in 1860. So I say, take a run at that kid next time. And he's your Stephen A. Douglas.
That's right. Good historical reference. All right. Last question we'll end on. What does the Derby difference mean to you?
I think the Derby difference to me is just the sense of community here. I really do believe that. I know it's an easy word to throw around, but I feel it. I feel it every day. It's the kids holding the door for you, saying hello. It's talking to one of my advisees, Sam, about the Red Sox playoffs. It's just the little things. It's the niceties. It's the sense of people having your back here. It's the other day when I got asked to write a brief write-up about our outdoor ed trip. It's me saying, I'm kind of drowning a little bit at the moment to Jerry Boardman. And Jerry, do you mind writing this one? You've done the trip a little longer. You organized it. Do you mind taken this, and him without a beat answering the email in an hour and saying, of course, I got you. So just those kind of things where, when you really need a little boost, a little help, people are there for you.
Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. So Mr. G, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure,
really
buddy.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
It's been really fun.
Let's do it again sometime.
And that's the ball game for today's episode of The Derby Difference. A huge thank you to our 7th grade U.S. history teacher for sharing his passion for history, the classroom, and of course, the game of baseball. Just like the game itself, his work reminds us that history is more than just dates and facts. It's about the stories, traditions, and community, the same qualities that make Derby such a special place. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us next time as we continue to explore the people and stories that define the Derby difference. Until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here at Derby, where character, curiosity, and community always step up to the plate. It's a good pun.